Hi, my name is Rob, and today I will look at an item in the environmental registry called Proposed Legislative Amendments to the Provincial Parks and Conservation Reserves Act 2006 and Historical Parks Act to support the town of Wasaga Beech tourism enhancement proposal. And what this is changing a park status in Wasaga Beech. This is in the town that violated the Endangered Species Act in Ontario regarding piping plovers, and I will talk about how this proposal is a bad proposal in my opinion, or potentially. So I will switch to the proposal. So this is the proposal. It's called Proposed Legislative Amendments to the Provincial Parks and Conservation Reserves Act 2006 and Historical Parks Act to support the town of Wasaga Beech tourism enhancement proposal. And as I said a few moments ago, this has a number 025-0694, and you can comment on this until August 11th, 2025. So what are the proposed changes? The provincial government, Ministry of Environment, Conservation and Parks, and the Ministry of Tourism, Cultural and Gaming are proposing to transfer the administration and control of Nancy Island from the Ministry of Environment, Conservation and Parks to the Ministry of Tourism, Cultural and Gaming. And they want to remove Nancy Island from the Provincial Parks and Conservation Reserves Act and include it under the Historical Parks Act. Now, this has ramifications in terms of environmental protection, potentially, as it is on the beach where piping plovers are located. And the Historical Parks Act doesn't have environmental protections in the Act, whereas the Provincial Parks Conservation Reserves Act does. I will look at both of the acts. And so, and then they have different purposes. And then they also want to have amendments to the Provincial Parks and Conservation Act. And then they want to remove beach areas 1 to New Wasaga and Allenwood Beach from the same act. And then they want public consultation. And the government, there is a history of the provincial government ignoring public consultation, but that might be a separate video. But I encourage you to write about this. And then it says how they're going to do public consultations. You can communicate with the contact listed in the notice if you're not part of the initial distribution. And then there is a regulatory registry as well. And then they have a map. Oh, and then the person is Ontario Park Southwest Zone 659 Exterior Road, London, Ontario, N6E 1L3, and then they have a phone number 519-668-0897. So that's that notice. But then there is a map. And the map shows Beach Area 1, Beach Area 2, New Wasaga Beach area, and Allenwood Beach, as well as Nancy Island. That would be transferred from one act to another. And if you notice, these are all on a beach, and it's potentially that there may be piping plovers. I haven't been to Wasaga Beach, and nor have I been to these particular areas, but I do know that piping plovers are on the beach from reading news articles and court cases. So it is interesting that it was after the bill, after the Ontario government removed the Endangered Species Act, that these changes are being made. So it is likely that piping plovers will be at greater risk in this area. So let's go into, let me see, I'll look at I'm just thinking what I should look at. Let's see. So there's the Provincial Parks and Conservation Reserves Act. I'll look at the two acts. So this is what's currently there. So the purpose of this act is to permanently protect a system of provincial parks and conservation reserves that include ecosystems that are representative of all Ontario's natural resource regions, protects provincially significant elements of Ontario's natural and cultural heritage, maintains biodiversity, provides opportunities for comparable, ecological, sustainable recreation. And then objectives or opportunities for residents of Ontario and visitors to increase their knowledge and appreciation of Ontario's natural and cultural heritage. Objectives of conservation reserves to permanently protect representative ecosystems, biodiversity, provincially significant elements of Ontario's natural and cultural history, and to maintain those areas to ensure that ecological integrity is maintained, and to facilitate scientific research and provide points of reference to support monitoring and ecological change. Compared to the Historical Parks Act, which does not have requirements around protecting biodiversity. It has land around protecting historical areas of sites of historical significance. Yeah, so those vastly different. The acts are completely different. Let's see. Just want to see. Oh, and then I'll look at the historical site. Let's see. Let's look at the historical site. So I found information about Nancy Island historical site. It's talking about a British vessel. It's around 1812. So I looked at a satellite. There was a map, Google Maps, showing the area, Nancy Island. And then Nancy Island, there's a lot of green space. I'm just zooming in. So it doesn't look like that those beach specifically on Nancy Island. However, there is definitely beaches in some of the other areas that have been removed. Now let's go back to the map. Yeah, so north of Nancy Island is areas that are also going to be removed. So that is concerning that they're no longer going to be part of the park. Because it does appear to be that there is suitable habitat for an endangered species. So let's go back. And then it's just other stuff about Wasaga Beech. Let's see. And then I have some historical stuff. So there's an article from Environmental Defense. Appeals court upholds town's convictions for damaging piping plover habitat. Town of South Wasaga Peninsula damaged piping plover habitat at Wasaga Beech on the shores of Lake Huron, and they were convicted in 2019. There was mechanical raking and bulldozing to the sand and dunes, and I saw that there was on the beach, and the piping plovers are listed under the Endangered Species Act, and then they were gone for 30 years. Those habitat losses continuing to threaten species survival and recovery. And then the town didn't apply for any exemptions to the act. Then there was also another article This article is from the novel by Fatma Said called Plovers and Friends, Wasaga Beech Town's 100,000 fine for bulldozing bird habitat stands. And this talks about the court case as well. And then there was a court decision by Justice Gladys I. Paldue, and which says the maintenance works done by the town far exceeds the work contemplated and agreed to by the Ministry of Natural Resources. And then there was full goals in the Ontario Endangered Species Act to prevent the loss of species caused by human activities, which damage the habitat of species. Measures to prevent significant reduction or loss of biological diversity should be taken even when full scientific certainty is not present, to prevent damage, to minimize threats to endangered species, and to protect species at risk, with appropriate regard to social, economic, and cultural considerations. And then I do have the actual court case. Which is Ontario Natural Resources and Forestry versus South Wasaga Peninsula Town 2022. And it largely goes over the same things. That it's piping plovers are an endangered species. And there's some background about piping plovers. There's efforts to protect piping plovers. The town used heavy equipment. 11 kilometers. The beach is 11 kilometers. And there's a quote, this fall exceeded the work contemplated and agreed to by the MNO. They damaged plover habitat by removing areas and features that plover have used and could use for scrapes and nesting by loosening soil, removing vegetation and debris, and leveling microtopography such as hummocks, moving foraging areas such as vegetation and rock, negatively impacting the invertebrate species that plover eat by disturbing the soil and substrate in which they live, removing features along the beach that the plover use for shelter and camouflage, such as microtopography, vegetation, and debris, and lowering the beach grade and loosening soil, which leads to flooding and erosion, degrading the overall ecosystem that piping plovers rely on. And then they referenced the Endangered Species Act. The judge in this case referenced the Endangered Species Act. So I don't know if the similar situation happened today because of legislation changes. If Wasaga Beech, the South Bruce Peninsula would be fine, or even charged. So I believe that this would put piping plovers at significant risk. So I'll go back to the notice. There's some related links. I'm not sure about if they lead to anything additional related to the environment, but those Ontario Building Designation Wasaga, Tourism Wasaga Beach, Destination Ontario. It does seem that there's some missing context in this notice, potentially. So that is why I guess I'll summarize. So I believe that this notice should be opposed because the transfer of the park to what is that called? The park under the Provincial Parks and Conservation Reserves Act to the Historical Parks Act would result in fewer protections to piping plovers or other endangered species that may be present. The town has a history of violating environmental law, which is weaker now that the provincial government has changed legislation and removed the Endangered Species Act. And so it's the culmination of the act changing, like the acts not having fewer environmental protections. There's resource potential for piping plovers. Piping plovers are endangered, so action should be taken for recovery strategies, which are no longer required. So changing the act that the park would fall under is troubling, but some of the areas would fall completely under the town, it looks like, and the town has a history of not respecting the environment, especially piping plovers. And yeah, this is what I looked at today. There are other items on the environmental registry I hope that you look at, and I wish you a good rest of your day. And remember that you have until August 11th, 2025 to comment on this proposal.